In 2002, Tom Cruise put on a pair of gloves, stood in front of a wall of light, and made every computer you'd ever touched feel like a rotary phone. Minority Report hit theaters on June 21st of that year, directed by Steven Spielberg, and it did something most science fiction films don't. It made the future feel like it was already late, not flying cars and laser guns late. Surveillance ads that knew your name, police arresting you for something you hadn't done yet, and a gesture interface so intuitive that MIT researchers went home and started building it for real. Tom Cruise played John Anderton, the chief of pre-crime, a system that stopped murders before they happened, right up until the morning it decided he was next. Colin Farrell was the government agent sent to audit him, and the reason 46 takes of a single sentence barely made it into the film. Samantha Morton was Agatha, the precog who sees everything, floating in a tank, reacting to murders that hadn't been added to the film yet. And Max von Sydow was the man behind all of it, calm, trusted, and the last person you'd suspect. Part noir detective film, part surveillance thriller, part technology roadmap that spent 20 years aging into the news cycle. It cost $102 million. It earned $358 million. Roger Ebert called it the best film of 2002. Engineers are still citing it as homework. And behind the wooden balls, the tank, the gloves, and the metal rods, there are stories that never made the poster. Today we're going back inside the pre-crime division for 15 facts you didn't know about Minority Report, including the man who wrote the source story and never saw a dollar from it, the birthday that cost 46 takes, and the surveillance state the film warned against, which got built anyway, and then dismantled, one city at a time, when the lawsuits caught up. Before we dive in, hit like and subscribe for more deep dives into the films that shaped us. Let's get into the countdown with number 15. Number 15. The man who wrote it died broke and never saw a dime. Philip K. Dick published The Minority Report in 1956 in a science fiction magazine called Fantastic Universe. He was paid a few cents per word. He wrote fast across his career, 2 stories a month sometimes, dozens of novels across 3 decades, because the money was never enough, because he spent most of his adult life, in his own words, in poverty and squalor. He wrote 44 novels and 121 short stories. He explored consciousness, surveillance, reality, and free will with an obsessiveness that, had he lived, would have made him one of the wealthiest authors in Hollywood history. He didn't live. Dick died on March 2, 1982, age 53, from a stroke. The last money he received was the rights payment for Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the novel that became Blade Runner. He got that money just before the end. And hold on, he saw about 20 minutes of the film. Effects footage shown to him in a screening room. He sat in silence through it twice, then turned around and said, "How is this possible? Those are not the exact images, but the texture and tone are exactly what I saw in my head when I was writing." If you'd been in that room, you would have watched a man realize he'd spent 30 years being right about everything and running out of time to know it. Then he died, 4 months before Blade Runner opened. He never saw the finished film, and he never saw Total Recall, or Minority Report, or A Scanner Darkly, or The Adjustment Bureau. By 2009, 27 years after his death, films based solely on Philip K. Dick's writing had grossed over $1 billion. The man who imagined pre-crime never got to watch the arrest. Number 14. Cate Blanchett said no. Samantha Morton gave everything. When Spielberg cast Samantha Morton as Agatha, the most powerful precog in the pre-crime system, he described her to interviewers as one of the great silent performers since the era of Dorothy Gish. He'd seen her play a mute laundress in Sweet and Lowdown, never speaking a word, and called it one of the finest screen performances he'd witnessed. What he didn't fully prepare her for was how physical the role would be. Morton spent the first half of production submerged in a tank of water, wearing a bodysuit, motion capture dots all over her face, reacting to crime scenes that didn't exist. The visions were added in post-production. She was acting against nothing, in water, for weeks. She was 23 years old. Think about what you were doing at 23, and then imagine spending 6 weeks floating in a tank, reacting to murders that hadn't been filmed yet. The second half of production, she spent limp and traumatized, draped over Tom Cruise's shoulder during chase sequences. Agatha's muscles are supposed to be completely atrophied. She's spent her entire life in a tank. Morton played that dead weight for every scene she's carried. Cruise genuinely had to haul her. She won the Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actress, the Empire Award for Best British Actress. Roger Ebert wrote that the two-shot of her and Cruise, her hanging over his shoulder, both scanning desperately in opposite directions, had genuine mystery. She did all of it wet, wordless, and reacting to empty space. Here's the kicker. Cate Blanchett turned this role down. Number 13, the one line that took Colin Farrell 46 takes. May 31st is Colin Farrell's birthday. He was 25. He was not yet famous in America. He had the role of Danny Whitwer, the Department of Justice agent sent to audit pre-crime ahead of its planned nationwide rollout. And on the morning of May 31st, 2001, he had a 6:30 a.m. call time. He'd gone out the night before, all night. He described it later on, The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, as being up to all sorts of nonsense. He turned off the light, the phone rang, and it was his driver, 6:10, morning. He made it to set. An assistant director looked at him and said he was in no condition to work. Farrell requested some beverages to steady himself and went on set. The scene required him to deliver the film's central philosophical premise in a single sentence, the line that frames every moral question in the next 2 hours. I'm sure you've all grasped the fundamental paradox of pre-crime methodology. It took 46 takes. Tom wasn't very happy with me, Farrell said. Then he added, and I got worse as we went along. In December 2005, Farrell checked into treatment. The scene is in the film. Whitwer walks in, nails it clean, delivers it with exactly the right quiet menace. You'd never know. The most important expository line in the script, the sentence the whole film turns on, was delivered on take 46 by a man running on birthday carnage. It looks completely normal. Number 12, Tom Cruise. Had metal rods put in his eyelids. There is a scene in Minority Report where John Anderton goes to an underground surgeon and has his eyes replaced. The old ones go in a jar. New ones go in. He wakes up bandaged, feeling his way through the dark while his pursuers close in. Here's what it took to shoot it. For the surgery portion, the part where Anderton lies on the table with his eyes mechanically forced open, Spielberg needed Cruise's eyes held wide without blinking. The solution was metal rods, actual metal rods, inserted into Tom Cruise's eyelids to pin them open while the camera moved over them. They numbed my eyes, Cruise told the New York Post. Stephen was very nervous. He wanted to shoot that as quickly as possible. It was wild. A little uncomfortable afterwards, but I liked how it looked. A little uncomfortable. That's it. That's the full complaint, from a man who has jumped off buildings, clung to the outside of a moving airplane, and ridden motorcycles off cliffs for other movies. The eyelid rods rated a little uncomfortable. Spielberg was more rattled than Cruise. He described it as one of the most nervous he'd been on any set and shot the sequence as fast as he possibly could. And no, I cannot tell you exactly how many takes it required, but given what we know about Farrell's day, let's be grateful it wasn't Cruise's birthday. The scene is 90 seconds long. Number 11. The free deal that made $107 million. Before cameras rolled, Spielberg sat down with Tom Cruise and offered him the deal that most movie stars would have walked out of the room over. No salary, zero up front, nothing. Spielberg had operated this way for 18 years. If my film makes no money, I get no money, he explained later. He made it a condition of working together. If you want to make this movie with me, you gamble with me. Cruise agreed. Each of them took 15% of the film's gross instead. Now do the math, because it's worth doing. The film grossed $358 million worldwide, 15% each. Spielberg and Cruise each took home approximately $53.7 million from their back-end deal alone. Together, just from the gross participation, they made $107 million between them, more than the entire film cost to produce. Wait, let that sit. Two people who signed contracts saying they'd work for free walked away with more money than the whole film cost to make. The arrangement was designed specifically to keep the budget under $100 million. It failed. Production reached $102 million regardless. The star's pay wasn't the problem, but here's what makes this the strangest Hollywood story of 2002. Variety ran pieces warning that the studios would have difficulty breaking, even because of what Spielberg and Cruise were set to collect. The studios were right to be nervous. Two of the most expensive people in the industry had technically worked for free, and ended up richer than most films that paid full freight. Number 10. Spielberg asked for his ugliest movie. Janusz Kaminski has photographed every Spielberg film since Schindler's List. He has 2 Academy Awards. He knows what a Spielberg movie looks like. Precise lighting, clean compositions, that specific backlighting that turns interiors into something slightly golden. For Minority Report, Spielberg told him, "I wanted to make the ugliest, dirtiest movie I have ever made." Kaminski started with high-speed film in Super 35 format, which requires an additional enlargement step that multiplies grain. Then he overlit everything deliberately, overexposed the images, created the technical conditions for footage that should look clinical and wrong. Then he applied bleach bypass at Technicolor. In standard development, the silver halide crystals that generate black and white contrast are dissolved away to leave only color. Bleach bypass skips that step. The silver stays. Contrast goes up hard, midtones disappear, and color drains out. Kaminski described it as a little bit closer to black and white with crisp black shadows. After all of that, the film was still too colorful. They stripped color an additional 40% in post-production. Here's the detail that hits hardest. There is exactly one scene in the entire film shot in full normal color. Anderton watching his home videos of the day his son disappeared at the pool. One scene, warm, saturated, the world as it used to be. Everything else is that chrome-tinted, washed-out present. Elvis Mitchell at the New York Times described the look as shot on chrome, caught on the fleeing bumper of a late 70s car. The ugliest film Janusz Kaminski ever made. Number 9, Spielberg built the future in 3 days at a hotel in Santa Monica. One of the experts proposed domesticated zebras. Another wanted bamboo genetically engineered to grow in hexagonal shapes for structural support. A third designed an eye wash that could change your iris color on demand. This was not a fever dream. This was the official meeting where Minority Report's future got invented. In 1999, 2 years before filming began, Spielberg rented out the Shutters Hotel in Santa Monica and invited 15 of the most forward-thinking people alive to spend 3 days figuring out what Washington, D.C. would actually look like in 2054. Futurists, architects, scientists, computer engineers. Peter Schwartz, co-founder of the Global Business Network. Virtual reality pioneer Jaron Lanier, who'd go on to help develop what became the Microsoft Kinect. MIT architecture Dean William Mitchell. Author Douglas Coupland, who brought the zebras. A DARPA biomedical researcher, an urbanist, a physicist. Their assignment? Figure out what life actually looks like in 50 years. The summit produced an 80-page document, the 2054 Bible, covering architecture, transportation, advertising, law enforcement, and social structure. 99% of what they proposed never made it to screen. What did make it? Gesture computing, retinal advertising, autonomous vehicles, and the personalized surveillance economy that structures the entire film. Spielberg told Wired, "We had all of them in one room talking to each other. Most of the software in the movie is based on their suggestions of what it will be like in 50 years. Quick pause. Which technology from this film has arrived closest to home for you? The retinal ads, the gesture interface, the autonomous cars? Drop it in the comments. And while you're down there, hit like and subscribe. Back to the countdown. Number 8. The movie interface that became real. When John Anderton stands at his screen and pulls images of future crimes through the air, scrubbing timelines, sorting data, expanding frames with a flick, you probably assumed Spielberg invented it. He didn't. He found it already existing at MIT. John Underkoffler was a graduate student at MIT's Media Lab when production designer Alex McDowell met him while scouting technological concepts in 2000. Underkoffler had spent years developing a real, functional, gestural computing system. McDowell brought him to Hollywood. Spielberg's direction was specific. The interface should feel like conducting an orchestra. Underkoffler designed the full system. the gloves, the gesture vocabulary, the way Dota snaps and moves, approaching it as if he were building an actual commercial prototype, not a prop, a product. Here's the wild part. He then actually built it. 4 years after the film, Underkoffler co-founded a company called Oblong Industries and developed a commercial version of the interface called G-Speak. By 2012, Boeing was using it. Government agencies were using it. One detail from filming that nobody talks about. Tom Cruise reportedly needed constant breaks during the interface sequences. You cannot hold your arms above your heart and wave them around continuously. Not for extended takes, not under studio lights. The most intuitive computer interface ever designed is physically exhausting. Underkoffler designed a system for a movie, watched the movie get made, and went back and built it for real. Minority Report was essentially the pitch deck. Number 7. Brands paid $25 million to prove the movie right. Minority Report is, among other things, a film about a surveillance economy so invasive that advertisements identify you by retinal scan and shout your name as you walk past. "Good afternoon, Mr. Yakamoto," a Gap hologram calls out to Anderton after he's swapped his eyes with someone else's. "How did you like those tank tops you bought last time?" It's the film's most unsettling image of where advertising leads. Here's the bill. Lexus paid $5 million to be in that film. Nokia paid $2 million for characters to use Nokia headsets. Gap, Pepsi, Guinness, American Express, and Reebok all signed deals. Total brand investment, $25 million. Roughly a quarter of the $102 million production budget came from corporations paying to be placed inside a dystopian vision of corporate surveillance. They read the script. They knew what the film was about. They wrote the checks anyway, because the alternative, not being in the film, felt worse than being in its nightmare. The brands in a film explicitly warning that personalized advertising would become indistinguishable from stalking paid for the right to appear in that warning because they calculated it would help them sell things. It's the most honest piece of self-satire in Hollywood history, except the corporations weren't being satirical. They were just doing exactly what the film said they'd do. Number 6. Before Spielberg. This was a Total Recall sequel. Here's how close we came to a different film. In 1993, Total Recall screenwriter Gary Goldman optioned Philip K. Dick's The Minority Report. As a sequel to Total Recall, the plan was specific. Arnold Schwarzenegger returns as Douglas Quaid, now running a law enforcement organization that uses mutants with precognitive abilities to predict crimes. Paul Verhoeven, who directed Total Recall, was attached to direct. Goldman and co-writer Ron Shusett wrote the sequel. Schwarzenegger was approached. He said the script was too complicated and passed. The studio behind the project was Carolco Pictures. Carolco had been bleeding money for years. Terminator 2 cost $94 million. The company posted a $91 million loss in 1991, even after that film's massive success. And by late 1995, it was in financial ruin. In November 1995, Carolco filed for bankruptcy, before a pirate adventure called Cutthroat Island even opened, a film that would go on to become the biggest box office bomb in Hollywood history and earn a Guinness World Record for its losses. The rights reverted. The Total Recall elements were stripped. John DeBont, director of Speed, was briefly attached before losing the studio's confidence after Speed 2. Eventually, the script reached Tom Cruise, who gave it to Spielberg. Spielberg brought in Scott Frank, who wrote Out of Sight, not science fiction, and told him to ignore the genre entirely and write a murder mystery. The film Schwarzenegger turned down gross $358 million and became one of the most technologically prophetic films of the last 30 years. Schwarzenegger's instinct that the script was too complicated was not wrong. It was a very complicated script. He just didn't realize that was the thing worth making. And if you want to know what the Schwarzenegger version would have looked like, picture Total Recall but set in Washington, D.C., with Martian mutants doing the precog work. Number 5. The Kiss. Tom Cruise didn't see coming. Lois Smith plays Dr. Iris Heinemann, the geneticist who created pre-crime and who tells Anderton the secret flaw in the system. She has maybe 4 minutes of screen time. She tends an overgrown greenhouse of genetically modified plants. She is elderly and slightly unnerving. During the scene where Anderton confronts her, Heinemann leans in and kisses him. Soft, sudden, wrong. It was not in the script. Lois Smith kissed Tom Cruise with no warning. His reaction? A genuine flinch, a flicker of real surprise crossing the face of a man trained for 2 decades to stay composed, is in the final film. Spielberg watched it happen on the monitor, kept the take, and moved on. Sit with this for a second. Tom Cruise, in 2002, was the most controlled performer in Hollywood. He prepared obsessively for every role. He performed his own stunts. He held his breath in bathtubs, flew planes, and rode motorcycles off cliffs. He was, by any measure, unflappable. A 70-year-old actress improvised a kiss, and his face broke. You can see it in the film. It lasts maybe a half second. But if you're watching for it, you'll never unsee it. Spielberg had cast Smith specifically because she brought that quality. The capacity to make the unexpected feel inevitable. He got exactly what he wanted. He just didn't tell his star it was coming. The flinch is the performance. And it's there because nobody warned Tom Cruise it was in the script. Because it wasn't. Number 4. The movie was finished. Then America caught up. Minority Report finished principal photography on July 18, 2001. 8 weeks later, September 11th happened. Spielberg released the film he'd made, unchanged, 9 months after the attacks. In June 2002, America was 9 months into major national security legislation. Intelligence agencies were expanding surveillance programs with broad bipartisan support. The public conversation in Washington was explicitly about what privacy Americans were willing to surrender in exchange for security. Expanded airport security, communications monitoring, preemptive measures, the whole infrastructure of catching people before they act. A film about exactly that opened in 3001 theaters on June 21st. Before the release, Spielberg told Roger Ebert, "The internet is watching us now. If they want to, they can see what sites you visit. In the future, television will be watching us. The scary thing is, we'll lose our right to privacy." He said that in 2002, not as a warning, as a description of something already underway. Releasing the film unchanged wasn't defiance or stubbornness. The film was already right. Spielberg had made a film about what America would become after the attacks, finished it before they happened, and released it into the aftermath without changing a frame. The world had written his ending for him. Number 3. The sci-fi film that wasn't written like sci-fi. Scott Frank's problem was specific. He doesn't start with concepts. He starts with people. His own rule, stated plainly in interviews, "Whenever I try to begin with a concept as opposed to a character, I end up getting stuck." And what Spielberg handed him was a pure concept. A man arrested for a murder he hasn't committed yet, populated by almost no one. The Philip K. Dick story runs 40 pages. The main character is described as balding and out of shape, closer to retirement than action hero. There was no villain scheming to destroy pre-crime, no dead son, no reason to feel anything beyond a paranoid bureaucrat trying to save his own skin. Frank had to build the entire human architecture of a $102 million film from scratch, in a genre he'd never worked in, on a concept he couldn't start from. Spielberg's direction cleared the path. Let me worry about the sci-fi element. Just write a terrific detective yarn. This is a murder mystery, a film noir, a whodunit. So Frank wrote a detective story. He invented the villain, Lamar Burgess, a man who built pre-crime with complete sincerity and then committed the one crime that would destroy it. He gave Anderton a missing son to replace his drive. He gave Agatha a murdered mother to give her grief. He made Whitwer the good cop who dies for being right. None of it is in Dick's story. None of it is science fiction. The film that gets called one of the great science fiction films of its era was, by its screenwriter's deliberate design, a detective story wearing a silver suit. Dick provided the premise. Frank provided everyone in it. Spielberg worried about the future. Number 2. They built pre-crime, and it failed exactly like the movie. In the film, pre-crime has one flaw. The system presents its conclusions as certainty, but the certainty is built on data that can be wrong about the specific individual it's pointing to. The whole movie is about what happens when you build a system that cannot be questioned. Predictive policing software appeared in American cities in the early 2000s. By 2012, the LAPD was using predpol, an algorithm that analyzed crime data to predict where crime would occur, then dispatched officers accordingly. Dozens of departments followed. The professor who developed it told The Guardian, "This is not Minority Report. Minority Report is about predicting who will commit a crime before they commit it." Researchers then studied predpol and found something uncomfortable. The software created a feedback loop. It sent officers to neighborhoods, officers made arrests, arrests became data, the data told the algorithm to send more officers to those neighborhoods. The crime rate in targeted areas wasn't higher, the arrest rate was higher because the police were already there. In 2021, the LAPD discontinued predpol. Chicago shut down its strategic subject list. The Pasco County, Florida Sheriff's Office ended its predictive program after a lawsuit and settled by admitting it had violated residents' constitutional rights. If you grew up in one of the neighborhoods those algorithms targeted, you already know this story. The actual pre-crime got built. It had exactly the problem the film identified in 2002. The system confused its own footprint for evidence. They weren't predicting crime. They were generating it. Number 1, Philip K. Dick predicted the future and died broke. Let's go back to Philip K. Dick. He wrote The Minority Report in 1956 for a pulp science fiction magazine. In Berkeley, writing 2 stories a month to make rent, selling them for a few cents a word. He spent the next 26 years writing obsessively, 44 novels, 121 short stories, while struggling with poverty, personal crises, failed marriages, and paranoia that sometimes crossed into genuine psychological crisis. He believed, for a period, that the government was surveilling him. He filed a report with the FBI. He was not entirely wrong about the surveillance. His great theme, across every book and story, was always the same question. What happens when the systems we build to protect us become the things that trap us? What happens when certainty is wrong? What happens when a man is accused of something he hasn't done? He was asking those questions in 1956. By 2009, films based solely on his writing had grossed over $1 billion. His estate generates millions annually. Minority Report alone, $358 million. Total, recall, $261 million. Blade Runner became one of the most influential films ever made. Dick died with almost nothing in his bank account. He saw 20 minutes of Blade Runner effects footage at a private screening before the end. Stunned by it, backing the film completely from that moment forward, he never saw it finished. He never saw any of them. The man who invented pre-crime, who wrote about a system that catches you for something you haven't done yet, lived his entire life one step ahead of the recognition that was coming for him. It arrived. He was already gone. And there you have it. 15 facts you didn't know about Minority Report. Which of these hit hardest? Tell us in the comments. And tell us which film we should wade into next. Like and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss the next one. Until next time.